The black royal carriage rolled through fog like a blade through silk, its iron-shod wheels carving patterns in the moonlit road. Inside, the vampire king leaned against velvet cushions, pale fingers tracing the rim of a crystal glass filled with something darker than wine. Then a small shadow stepped into the road. The horses reared. A little girl stood before them, hair tangled with leaves, dress torn at the hem, chest heaving as she clutched a framed portrait against her heart. "Stop," she cried, her voice breaking the ancient silence. "You're my dad." The coachman reached for his whip, ready to clear the path, but Valerius Nightborn raised one hand. The girl's eyes locked with his through the carriage window, silver meeting silver. Her face went pale. "Father," she whispered, and the word pierced him like sunlight through a vampire's heart. He hadn't heard it in centuries. Not since the human woman he loved vanished, carrying a truth he was never told. The child stumbled forward, her small hands gripping the carriage door with desperate strength. "Mom is in danger," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They're hurting her." I didn't know who else to stop. The fog thickened. The moon hung frozen. And in that moment, the most feared creature in the kingdom made a decision that had nothing to do with immortality or power. He opened the carriage door. "Get inside," he said quietly, his voice ancient and soft. "All of you, you're coming home with me." Because what he discovers when he takes them to his fortress will unravel centuries of secrets and force him to face a truth he can no longer outrun. Thank you for joining me today for another incredible story that will take you on an emotional journey through love, sacrifice, and redemption. If you're already captivated by this tale of the Vampire King and his long-lost daughter, do me a huge favor. Smash that subscribe button right now and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. And I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Are you Team Vampire King or Team Humanity? Let me know. Also, if you're loving the intensity of this opening, give this video a thumbs up. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more epic stories like this every single day. Now, let's dive deeper into the shadows and discover what happens when a king who ruled through fear learns the true meaning of love. King Valerius Nightborn had ruled the Night Court for 3 centuries. His name ended wars before they began. Noble houses paid tribute in blood just to avoid his attention. Vampire elders bowed when he entered a room. Even the moon seemed to dim when his carriage passed through the kingdom. But standing on that fog-wrapped road, staring down at a 7-year-old child who called him father, Valerius felt something he hadn't experienced since his mortal youth, 300 years gone. Complete and utter disbelief. The child climbed into the black velvet interior of his carriage, her small frame swallowed by the darkness within. She clutched the portrait against her chest, its gilded frame scratched and worn. Behind her, 3 other noble children scrambled inside, traveling companions, by their fine clothes and frightened faces, seeking protection beneath the shadow of his power. Valerius slid in beside the girl, studying her face in the silver moonlight filtering through the window. The resemblance was impossible to deny. Her silver eyes, luminous in the dark. The sharp angle of her chin. Even the way she held herself, proud despite her terror, was a mirror he hadn't looked into for lifetimes. It was like seeing his own immortal features reflected through a lens of humanity and innocence. "What's your name, child?" Valerius asked, his voice gentler than it had been in decades. "Elena," she whispered, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "Elena Ashcroft, though Mama said my real name should be Nightborn." The surname hit him like holy water. Nightborn. His name. A name she had no right to carry unless. Valerius felt the centuries tilt beneath him. His mind raced back through time, 7 years, 8, 9, to Isolde Ravenwood, the human woman who had walked into his court as an emissary and walked out with his immortal heart. The woman who had vanished from his fortress one autumn night, leaving only a note that said she had to protect something precious. He had assumed she meant herself. "Your mother," Valerius said carefully, his ancient composure cracking. What's her name? Isolde. Elena replied, her voice barely audible above the creak of the carriage wheels. Isolde Ravenwood. She told me that was her name before she loved you. Before everything changed. Valerius closed his eyes, memories flooding through him like moonlight through stained glass. Isolde's laugh echoing through his throne room. Her human warmth against his cold skin. The way she traced the scars on his chest, remnants of his mortal death, and whispered about building something beautiful in a world of darkness. The morning he woke to find her chambers empty, her scent fading from the silk sheets, every trace of her existence erased, as if by magic. He had torn kingdoms apart searching for her, but it was as if she had simply dissolved into myth. Elena, Valerius said, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. Why did your mother leave? What did she tell you about me? The little girl's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She said you were the bravest man. Elena paused, correcting herself. The bravest being she ever knew. But that your enemies would use me against you if they knew I existed. She said she had to keep me hidden until I was old enough to protect myself. Elena held up the portrait with trembling hands. But now she's in trouble. And I remembered what she taught me. If something really, really bad happened, I should find the black carriage with a silver crest. I should find you. Valerius took the portrait carefully, as if it might turn to ash in his immortal hands. The image showed a younger version of himself, still pale, still otherworldly, but with softer edges. Human-looking almost, and beside him, radiant in midnight blue silk, stood Isolde. Her hand rested over his heart. Her smile was genuine, unafraid. On the back, in Isolde's careful script, were words that shattered what remained of his centuries-old control. Elena's father. The king I will always love. The protector I pray she'll never need to find. Valerius felt something crack inside his chest, where his heart had stopped beating 300 years ago. Isabella had been protecting their daughter. Their daughter. The words felt impossible. Foreign. He had a child. A little girl who had lived in secrecy for 7 years while he built his empire on fear and blood and iron law. A daughter who had been taught stories of the night court not as monsters to flee from, but as family to run toward when all else failed. Where is your mother now? Valerius asked, his voice steady despite the rage building in his immortal veins. Elena's voice shook as she spoke. 3 men came to our cottage. They wore dark cloaks with a red seal. Mama recognized it, and her face went white. They said someone owed them something precious. Mama said we owed nobody nothing. They got angry and started breaking things. The child's breath hitched. Mama told me to hide in the root cellar with the other children from the village. But I could hear them hurting her. They said they were taking her somewhere to teach the night court a lesson about respecting boundaries. Valerius's jaw tightened. His mind was already calculating possibilities, running through lists of enemies and rival courts who might use an innocent woman to send him a message. But something didn't align. If these rogues knew about Isolde's connection to him, why would they risk his wrath? Unless she had hidden her identity so completely that she'd become a target for entirely different reasons. Unless someone had betrayed her location deliberately. Did you see these men clearly? Valerius asked. Can you describe them? Elena nodded, her small face serious, with concentration. The leader had white hair and a scar across his eye. The second one had markings on his neck that glowed red, like burning coals. The third one laughed the whole time. They drove a black cart pulled by horses with red eyes. Valerius felt his blood, what little moved through his ancient veins, turn to ice. White hair, scar, burning marks, red-eyed horses. The description painted a clear picture, and it was worse than he'd imagined. The rogue generals, Cassian Vex, Rurik Blackveil, and Dorian Skell, former members of his own night guard, exiled for treason 5 years ago after they attempted to overthrow his rule. They were known for their cruelty and their complete disregard for the laws that kept vampire and human worlds separate. If they had Isolde, This wasn't about ransom or territory or politics. This was about destroying Valerius in the most personal way possible. But how had they found her? Isolde had disappeared so completely that even Valerius's network of spies and informants had failed to track her. Someone had given the rogues information. Someone who knew about Isolde's connection to the Night King and had decided to use it as a weapon. Elena, Valerius said, his voice deadly calm. I need you to think carefully. Has anyone been watching your cottage? Strangers in the village asking questions about your mother. The little girl bit her lip, thinking hard. There was a man. He started coming to the village market about 2 weeks ago. He always wore a hood, but I saw his eyes once. They were gold, like a cat's. Mama noticed him too. She started making me stay inside more. She wouldn't let me go to the well alone anymore. Valerius felt the pieces sliding into place with terrible precision. Surveillance. The rogues had been watching Isolde, learning her patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They had been patient, professional. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a calculated attack designed to wound Valerius in ways no army ever could. The carriage pulled through the massive iron gates of the Nightborn fortress, torches blazing to life along the walls as ancient magic recognized its master's return. The structure loomed against the night sky, all black stone and silver spires, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Elena pressed her face against the window, eyes wide. The other noble children huddled together, silent and afraid. Is this where you live? Elena whispered. Yes, Valerius said quietly. And now it's where you'll stay. Protected. Safe. He helped her down from the carriage, noting how her small hand trembled in his cold grip. Night guards materialized from the shadows, their faces impassive behind silver masks, but Valerius saw the questions in their eyes. Their immortal king had returned with human children. Something had changed. Inside the great entrance hall, servants moved like ghosts, lighting candles and preparing chambers. Valerius led Elena up a spiral staircase to a tower room, one that overlooked the rose gardens Isolde had loved during her time in the fortress. The room had stayed empty since her departure. Locked. Untouched. Now he opened it for their daughter. Elena stepped inside, her worn shoes sinking into plush carpet. Moonlight poured through tall windows. And there, on a writing desk covered in 7 years of dust, Elena found something that made her gasp. A book. Leather-bound, with silver clasps. On the cover, in Isolde's handwriting, for our daughter, if she ever needs to know the truth. Elena opened it with shaking hands. The first page showed a pressed rose, still red, preserved by magic. Beneath it, Isolde had written, My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then you've found him. Your father, King Valerius Nightborn, the vampire I loved, the man who doesn't know you exist. I left to protect you, not from him, but from those who would use you to destroy him. But if you're holding this book, then my plan has failed and you need him now. Trust him, my darling. He has seen centuries of darkness, but his heart still remembers light. And tell him this, I never stopped loving him. I never will. Even now. Valerius read over Elena's shoulder, his immortal hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard the wood cracked. Isolde had known. She'd known the danger. She'd known the sacrifice. And she'd made it anyway. To protect the daughter he never knew he had. Valerius stepped back from the book, his mind racing through decades of memories he'd tried to bury. He needed to understand. Needed to piece together how 7 years had passed without him knowing his greatest treasure walked the earth in secret. Elena, he said quietly, I need you to tell me everything your mother told you about the night court. About me. About why she left. The little girl nodded, clutching the book against her chest the way she'd clutched the portrait. And as she began to speak, her young voice filling the empty tower room with truths that would reshape a kingdom, Valerius understood that his immortal life had just divided into 2 eras. Before this night, and after. Elena settled into the velvet chair by the window, moonlight casting silver patterns across her small face. The other noble children had been taken to guest chambers, their exhausted forms finally surrendering to sleep. But Elena remained awake, clutching Isolde's book like a lifeline. Valerius stood near the fireplace, unlit. As vampires had no need for warmth, his immortal stillness broken only by the tension in his shoulders. 3 centuries of control, and this child had shattered it in a single night. Mama used to tell me stories every night, Elena began, her voice soft but steady. Not fairy tales about princes and dragons. Stories about you. Valerius's pale eyes fixed on her. What did she say? She said you were the king of shadows. That you ruled the night with justice, not cruelty. Elena's fingers traced the silver clasp of the book. She said people feared you because they didn't understand that protection sometimes looks like power. That safety sometimes requires strength. The words hit Valerius like dawn breaking over a vampire's skin. Isolde had defended him, even in hiding, even when she had every reason to paint him as the monster who drove her away. She never called you evil, Elena continued. She said you were the bravest person she'd ever known because you carried the weight of keeping 2 worlds from destroying each other. The humans, the vampires, all balanced on your shoulders. Valerius moved to the window, his reflection absent in the glass. When did she paint this portrait? Elena opened the book to a marked page. Pressed flowers fell out, night-blooming jasmine, Isolde's favorite. The portrait was painted during the treaty moon. That's what Mama called it. 7 years and 9 months ago. She said it was the last time she felt truly safe. The last time she allowed herself to be happy. 7 years and 9 months. The calculation struck Valerius like a stake through the ribs. She was already carrying you, he whispered. Elena nodded. Mama said she found out the night before she left. She went to the court physician, an old vampire named Theron who served your family for centuries. He confirmed it, but he also warned her. Warned her of what? That vampire and human children are rare, dangerous. That your enemies would kill me before I took my first breath if they knew I existed. Elena's voice wavered. Mama said Theron helped her escape, gave her potions to hide my scent, to mask what I was. He told her to run far and never tell you, because if you knew, you'd tear apart kingdoms to find us. And that would lead your enemies right to me. Valerius felt ancient rage coiling in his chest. Theron, his most trusted advisor, the vampire who had served his family since before Valerius's own transformation. Theron had known, had helped Isolde disappear, had watched Valerius grieve for 7 years and said nothing. Loyalty or betrayal. The line had never felt thinner. Your mother sacrificed everything, Valerius said quietly. Her home, her safety, her love, Elena finished. She sacrificed being with you to keep me alive. She told me that was what real love looked like. Choosing someone else's life over your own happiness. Valerius turned from the window, studying Elena in the moonlight. Now that he knew what to look for, the signs were unmistakable. Her silver eyes, too bright for a human child. The way she moved, fluid, almost predatory, despite her youth. The fact that she'd walked through a fog-thick forest at night without stumbling once. Elena, he said carefully, do you feel different from other children? She bit her lip, hesitant. Sometimes. Mama said I wasn't supposed to talk about it. You're safe here. Tell me. I can see in the dark. Really well. Better than the other children. Elena glanced at her hands. And sometimes, when I'm scared or angry, my teeth hurt. Like they want to grow sharper. Mama gave me tea that made the feeling go away. Dormant vampire traits. Isolde had been suppressing them with herbs and potions, keeping Elena human enough to hide among mortals. But the bloodline was there, waiting beneath the surface. The portrait, Valerius said, redirecting before Elena could see the concern in his eyes. Why did your mother keep it? Why risk carrying proof of our connection? Elena opened to another page in the book. A letter, written in Isolde's elegant script. My dearest Elena, I kept this portrait because some nights, when the loneliness becomes unbearable, I need to remember that love was real. That what I gave up wasn't a fantasy, but a living, breathing choice. Your father deserves to be more than a story I tell you before bed. He deserves to be remembered as he truly was, complicated, powerful, but capable of tenderness that surprised even him. If you ever meet him, show him this portrait. Let him see that I carried proof of our love even when I couldn't carry him with me. Valerius's hands trembled, an impossible thing for a creature of his age and power. But he felt the weight of 7 lost years crushing down on him. 7 years of Elena's childhood he'd never witness. First words, first steps, first moments of wonder, all stolen by the very danger his existence created. I remember the night she left, Valerius said, his voice distant with memory. I woke and her scent was fading from the sheets. I searched every room, every tower. I found only a note saying she had to protect something precious. I assumed she meant herself for me, from what I was. She was protecting me from what you'd face because of me, Elena said quietly. The truth reoriented everything. Isolde hadn't fled from him. She'd fled for him, to spare him the impossible choice between his throne and his family. To prevent the civil war that would erupt if the court discovered their king had produced an heir with human blood. She'd loved him enough to disappear. Mama used to stand at the window on nights like this, Elena whispered. When the moon was full, she'd cry sometimes. I asked her once why she was sad, and she said she was remembering someone she couldn't stop loving even though loving him hurt. Before Valerius could respond, the tower door burst open. A night guard stumbled in, silver mask askew, breathing hard despite vampires having no need for breath. My lord, he gasped. The outer wards. They've been breached. Valerius's entire demeanor shifted. Softness vanished. The vampire king returned. Where? Eastern border. Multiple points simultaneously. It's coordinated, sire. The guard's voice shook. And there's a message, carved into the ward stones with burning iron. What does it say? The guard's eyes flicked to Elena, hesitant. Speak, Valerius commanded. It says, we have the mother. Now we see you have the child. Come alone to the Blood Cathedral at midnight tomorrow, or we take them both. The temperature in the room plummeted. Elena's face was drained of color. They know I'm here? Valerius crossed to her in one fluid movement, placing a cold hand on her shoulder. They won't touch you. But as he met the night guard's terrified gaze, he understood the terrible truth. The rogues had been watching the fortress. They'd seen Elena arrive. And now they held all the pieces to destroy him. Valerius's hand tightened on Elena's shoulder. Take her to the inner chambers. Triple the ward spells. No one enters without my direct command. The night guard bowed, but before he could move, a sound split the night. The harsh cry of a raven echoing through the tower window. Both parties. Marcellus's hand moved to his sword. You would execute our king for being saved? I would preserve the realm from chaos, Seraphine said coldly. If the human lives, the bond lives. If the bond lives, every vampire court from here to the old continent will see our king as compromised, weakened, human-touched. She speaks the truth, Darius added. Already whispers have begun. Some say this is the prophecy, the mortal hand that breaks the crown. Prophecy is superstition. Alara's voice cut through the rising tension. But blood law is not. The covenant states clearly, the saved and the savior are bound until death claims one or both. This bond cannot be severed by decree or desire. Selim listened to them argue, feeling the hook behind his sternum pull tighter with each word. The girl, whoever she was, had no idea what she'd done. She'd saved a stranger from drowning and unknowingly chained herself to laws older than nations. Enough. His voice was quiet, but it silenced the room instantly. Selim stood, his body moving with the deadly grace of a predator, and faced his court. The girl will be found, but she will not be harmed. My lord, Darius began. I have spoken. Selim's eyes swept across each of them, 2 centuries of absolute authority compressed into that single gaze. No one touches her. No one speaks of this beyond these walls. Marcellus, assemble your best trackers. Find her quietly. Bring me information, not a body. And when will we find her? Marcellus asked carefully. Then I will decide what honor demands. Selim turned away from them, dismissing them without words. He heard them leave, Darius and Seraphine with barely concealed fury, Alara with troubled silence, Marcellus with soldier's efficiency. When the sanctuary was empty, Selim walked to where rainwater had pooled on the marble floor, tracked in by his quartz boots. He stared at it, seeing fragments of the river, feeling the echo of freezing water in lungs that no longer needed air. A human girl had dove into that water, had shredded her hands on broken glass, had dragged him to shore with strength she shouldn't possess, had violated every law his realm was built upon, and probably had no idea. The bond pulled tight, a compass pointing toward her through the dark. Selim didn't know if what he felt was gratitude or rage. He only knew that finding her was no longer optional. The debt had been made, and blood law demanded it be paid. Naira made it back to Blackwater Span just before dawn. Her hands had stopped bleeding, but the cuts were deep, filled with river silt and bacteria that would guarantee infection without treatment she couldn't afford. Her lungs rattled with every breath, worse than before, the cold water having accelerated whatever disease had been slowly killing her for months. She crawled into the dry corner beneath the bridge, where she kept her things and wrapped herself in the only blanket Crow hadn't destroyed. Her body shook so violently her teeth clattered. Fever was already building behind her eyes, turning her vision hazy at the edges. The man from the river, the one with silver hair and a crown of thorns, was alive. She'd seen the paramedics revive him, seen him breathe. That should have meant something. But as dawn broke cold and gray over the city, Naira realized the truth. Saving him had changed nothing. She was still here, still invisible, still dying by degrees beneath a bridge no one cared about. At least, she thought bitterly, she'd die knowing she wasn't completely useless. 40 blocks north, Inspector Silas Crow sat in his office reviewing footage he wasn't supposed to have. The highway department had scrubbed the crash video from official records within 2 hours, unusual, but not unprecedented for accidents involving high-profile victims. What was unprecedented was how thoroughly it had been erased. No backups. No redundancies. Just gone, as if it never existed. But Crow had learned long ago that nothing truly disappeared if you knew where to look. He'd retrieved the footage from a traffic camera positioned on the opposite side of the bridge, one that officially wasn't working that night. He watched the video for the 5th time. The car is going over. The small figure diving in. The impossible rescue. He zoomed in on the figure's face during the single frame where the angle was right. Son of a bitch, Crow whispered. The rat. The homeless trash he'd been harassing beneath Blackwater's Span Naira Vale. He leaned back in his chair, mind racing. The car had diplomatic plates he'd checked. The passenger list was classified above his clearance level. And the sanitization job on the footage screamed money, power, and connections that made city officials move like puppets on strings. Someone very important had nearly died in that river. And Naira, worthless, invisible Naira, had saved them. Crow smiled slowly. He'd spent 3 years tormenting her because it was easy, because she was nothing, because hurting powerless people was a hobby that cost him nothing. But now she might be worth something after all. He picked up his phone and made a call to a contact who dealt in information the city pretended didn't exist. I need to know who was in the vehicle from the Blackwater crash, he said. And I need to know what they're willing to pay to find the person who saved them. Beneath Blackwater Span, Naira woke to the feeling of being watched. It wasn't the first time. Living on the streets taught you to sense predators, human ones at least. But this felt different. The weight of unseen eyes had followed her for 2 days now, a presence that made her skin crawl even when she couldn't identify the source. She told herself it was paranoia, fever, exhaustion. But when she went to the gas station 3 blocks away to refill her water bottle, she saw him. A man in dark clothing standing across the street, perfectly still in a way humans never were. His eyes tracked her through the window, and when she met his gaze, something in his expression made her blood run cold. Not hunger, not lust. Something older and infinitely more dangerous. Naira left through the back exit, heart hammering, and ran. She felt him following, silent, patient, never quite close enough to catch, but never far enough to lose. She ducked through alleys, climbed a fence despite her screaming lungs, and finally lost him in the maze of abandoned warehouses near the industrial district. She pressed herself against cold brick, gasping, vision swimming. When had being invisible stopped protecting her? When had she become visible to the wrong people? The answer came to her with horrible clarity. The river. The rescue. The man with the crown. Saving him had made her seen. And being seen, she was learning, was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Seal the fortress, Valerius commanded. No one enters. No one leaves. And bring me the list of the 12. Every name, every oath, every possible weakness. As the guard rushed to obey, Elena pulled Isolde's book closer to her chest. They're going to kill Mama if you don't give up everything, she whispered. Valerius looked at his daughter, 7 years old, and already understanding the impossible weight of crowns and kingdoms. They're going to try, he said quietly. But first, I'm going to find out which one of my trusted advisors sold us out. His silver eyes gleamed in the darkness. And then I'm going to remind them why betraying the vampire king is a death sentence worse than exile ever was. The council chamber hadn't seen this many bodies in centuries. Valerius stood at the head of the obsidian table, his presence commanding absolute silence. To his right sat the vampire elders, ancient creatures who'd witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms. Their pale faces showed no emotion, but their eyes tracked every movement with predatory focus. To his left sat something unprecedented in 300 years of Night Court rule. Humans. Lady Miriam Ashford, ambassador from the eastern provinces. Captain Thorne Blackwater, commander of the Human Border Guard. Scholar Devon Gray, keeper of the treaty archives. Each had been summoned in the dead of night, pulled from their beds by urgent summons bearing the king's seal. Their presence sent shockwaves through the vampire court. This is an outrage, hissed Elder Constantine, his voice like wind through dead leaves. Humans have no place in matters of night court security. They have every place, Valerius said quietly, when the threat concerns both our worlds. He placed the blood-ink letter on the table. Several elders recoiled from its scent. Cashin Vex, Rurik Blackveil, and Dorian Skell have returned. They hold a human hostage. They've breached our wards. And they have an agent within these walls feeding them information. Valerius's silver eyes swept the room. This is no longer a vampire problem. It's a kingdom problem. Lady Miriam leaned forward, her weathered face carved with concern. What do they want? My throne, Valerius said simply, and my silence about the child. The temperature in the room dropped. What child? Elder Constantine demanded. Valerius gestured toward the chamber doors. They opened, revealing Elena standing between 2 night guards. She wore a clean dress now, midnight blue with silver embroidery, borrowed from the fortress stores. Her silver eyes reflected torchlight as she entered. The elders erupted. Impossible. A half-breed. This cannot stand. Silence. Valerius's voice cracked like thunder. The room fell quiet. Her name is Elena Ashcroft, Valerius said, each word deliberate and final. She is 7 years old. She is half human, half vampire. And she is my daughter. The admission hung in the air like a blade. Elder Moira, oldest of the council, rose slowly. You acknowledge her? Publicly? I do. This violates centuries of precedent. A hybrid heir threatens the purity of the bloodline. It invites chaos. It invites truth. Valerius interrupted. I will not hide my daughter in shadows while traitors use her existence as leverage. She stands here under my protection and the protection of this court. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. Captain Thorne cleared his throat. My lord, if I may, the human territories will support this decision. Many of us have argued for years that cooperation between our peoples requires more than treaties. It requires. He glanced at Elena. Connection. Connection? Elder Constantine spat the word. This is weakness masquerading as sentiment. No, Valerius said, and his voice carried the weight of 3 centuries. This is strength you've forgotten how to recognize. He moved to stand beside Elena, placing a hand on her shoulder. For 300 years, I've ruled through fear, through distance, through the belief that caring for nothing made me invincible. His silver eyes met each elder's gaze in turn. But fear doesn't inspire loyalty. It inspires betrayal. And distance doesn't create safety. It creates blind spots that enemies exploit. You're changing the laws because of one child? Elder Moira asked. I'm changing them because they were always wrong. The declaration sent murmurs rippling through the chamber. Scholar Devon spoke up, his voice steady despite the tension. The old treaties do allow for hybrid bloodlines, my lord. The clauses were written, but never enacted. If you invoke Article 17, I invoke it now, Valerius said. Elena is recognized as my daughter, protected under Knight Court law and human treaty. Any who harm her commit an act of war against both kingdoms. Lady Miriam smiled faintly. The eastern provinces accept this decree. Captain Thorne nodded, as does the border guard. The vampire elders exchanged glances, centuries of tradition warring with the reality of their king's absolute authority. Finally, Elder Moira inclined her head. The old laws bend, but they do not break. We acknowledge the child. But understand, Valerius, you've painted a target on all our backs by showing care for something. Let them come, Valerius said coldly. They'll learn what happens when they mistake love for weakness. He turned to the night guards lining the walls. Triple the ward rotations. No one accesses the ward stones without 2 witnesses present. All outgoing messages are to be reviewed. All incoming messengers detained and questioned. My lord, one guard ventured. That level of restriction the court will feel like a prison. Better a prison than a grave, Valerius said. We have a traitor among us. Until they're found, no one is above suspicion. As the meeting dissolved into tactical planning, Elena slipped quietly from the chamber. The other noble children, 3 boys and 2 girls who'd traveled with her that fateful night, waited in an adjoining room. They'd been orphans, wards of minor houses, traveling to the capital for seasonal placement. Now they were witnesses to history. Is it true? Asked Thomas, the oldest boy. You're really the king's daughter? Elena nodded, exhaustion weighing on her. Does that make us princes and princesses by association? Asked little Mira, only 5 years old. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. I don't think it works that way. Well, we're stuck here together, Thomas said practically. Might as well be friends. Over the next hours, as defensive measures transformed the fortress into a sealed citadel, something unexpected happened. The children played. In a tower room filled with ancient books and forgotten toys, laughter echoed for the first time in decades. Elena taught them games her mother had shown her. They taught her card tricks and shadow puppets. Night guards passing by paused, startled by sounds they'd never heard within these stone walls. Warmth.
Joy.
Innocence. The fortress, built on fear and power, began to feel like something else. A home. Valerius found them just before dawn, asleep in a pile of cushions and blankets. Elena rested in the center, protected by the other children's unconscious embrace. He stood watching them, feeling something crack further in his ancient chest. My lord. A scout appeared at his elbow, breathless. We've found it. Found what? The Blood Cathedral. abandoned for centuries on the northern border. But there are fresh tracks, signs of occupation. And the scout hesitated. Screams, sire. Our lookouts heard screaming on the wind. Valerius's jaw tightened. Isolde. How many rogues? Unknown. But the cathedral is warded with blood magic. We can't get close enough for accurate counts. Show me on a map. As the scout led him away, Valerius glanced back at the sleeping children. His daughter, peaceful for the first time since stopping his carriage. The cathedral was a 2 hour ride. Midnight tomorrow was 20 hours away. Time was running out. And somewhere in that ruined cathedral, the woman he'd never stopped loving was screaming. The chains were cold iron, blessed with holy water to burn against vampire flesh. They didn't know Isolde was human. Or perhaps they simply didn't care. She hung suspended in the ruins of what had once been a sanctuary, the Blood Cathedral, named for the massacre that had claimed its congregation 2 centuries ago. Moonlight bled through shattered stained glass, painting fractured colors across stone floors stained with old death. Isolde's wrists were raw. Blood trickled down her arms, soaking into the tattered remains of her dress. But she kept her eyes open, kept her breathing steady. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Still conscious, are we? The voice slithered from the shadows. Cassian Vex emerged, white hair gleaming like bone in the dim light. The scar across his eye twisted as he smiled. Remarkable resilience for a human. I can see why our dear king was infatuated. Isolde said nothing. Speech cost energy she couldn't spare. Cassian circled her slowly, boots clicking against stone. Do you know what you cost him? What your little disappearing act did to the great Valerius Nightborn. Behind him, Rurik Blackveil materialized, massive, brutal, arcane marks glowing faint red on his neck and arms. The forbidden blood magic pulsed with each heartbeat, feeding off pain in the air. He tore apart the kingdom looking for you, Rurik rumbled. Reduced villages to ash. Interrogated thousands. All for one insignificant human woman. Not insignificant, Dorian Skell added, stepping into view with that perpetual smile that never touched his eyes. She carried his greatest secret, his greatest weakness. He leaned close, breath cold against Isolde's cheek. Tell us, dear Isolde. Did he know? Before you ran?
No.
The words scraped from her throat. Truth, Cassian confirmed, sniffing the air. She doesn't reek of deception. How noble. You protected him by disappearing. He laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. And now your noble sacrifice means nothing, because we have you, and we have the child. Isolde's eyes snapped to his face, fear breaking through her careful composure. Ah, there it is. Cassian's smile widened. Maternal instinct. Don't worry, Elena is quite safe.
For now.
Tucked away in her father's fortress, probably being pampered with silk and sweets. Touch her, Isolde whispered, and there's nowhere in existence you can hide. Bold words from a woman in chains. Not my words. Isolde met his gaze steadily.
Hi.
You know what he's capable of when he's merciful. Imagine what he'll do when you threaten his daughter. The smile faltered on Cassian's face. Because she was right, and they all knew it. Isolde stood in the doorway of Valerius's chambers, dawn approaching. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, feeling the impossible life growing within. The pregnancy should have been impossible. Vampire and human, life and death. But Theron had confirmed it with ancient tests and older magic. You're carrying a miracle, the old vampire had whispered. Or a target. In this court, there's often no difference. Isolde had watched Valerius sleep, as close to sleep as vampires came. His pale face was peaceful, free from the weight of crowns and centuries. She'd memorized every line, every shadow. I love you, she'd whispered. That's why I have to leave. She'd kissed his cold forehead, left the note that would haunt him for years, and disappeared into a world that didn't want vampire kings or hybrid children. The first year was the hardest. Constantly moving, constantly afraid. Every shadow could hide an assassin. Every stranger could be a spy. But when Elena was born, tiny, perfect, with Valerius's silver eyes, Isolde had understood she'd made the right choice. She'd given her daughter a chance at life, even if it meant living without love. "You're remembering him," Dorian observed, tilting his head. "I can see it in your eyes. The great romance. The sacrifice." He traced a finger down her cheek, and Isolde jerked away. "Did you ever regret it? Leaving all that power for a life of poverty and fear?" "Not once," Isolde said firmly. "Liar."
No.
She met his gaze. "I regretted that the world you created made loving him dangerous. I regretted that your coup attempt forced me to choose between his throne and our child's life. But I never regretted loving him." Cashin's expression darkened. Touching, but ultimately pointless. "Your love story ends here, in this cathedral, with you as bait and him as prey." "You think he'll come alone?" Isolde asked. "We've given him no choice. Come alone at midnight tomorrow, abdicate, or you die." Cashin gestured to the shadows where more figures waited, mercenaries, rogue vampires, hired blades. "We have 30 fighters here, blood mages, assassins. Even if he brings his night guard, we'll be ready." "You're not ready for what he'll become when you threaten his family," Isolde said quietly. Rurik laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "The girl makes him weak. Love makes him weak. That's the entire point. Love doesn't make him weak." Isolde's voice carried through the ruined cathedral. "It makes him unstoppable. You were exiled for underestimating him once. You're about to make the same mistake." Cashin's hand shot out, gripping her jaw painfully. "You have remarkable faith in a monster who let us live long enough to take his woman and child. That monster showed you mercy," Isolde said through clenched teeth. "And you're going to wish he'd chosen execution instead." Cashin released her roughly, frustration flashing across his face. Because deep down beneath the bravado and planning, they all felt it. The creeping certainty that they'd miscalculated. That Valerius Nightborn wasn't the same vampire they'd betrayed 5 years ago. "Bring the ritual components," Cashin ordered. Turning away. "We need insurance." Dorian and Rurik moved to obey, dragging forward a stone altar carved with ancient symbols. Blood channels ran through the carved surface, designed to focus power and pain into something tangible. "What is that?" Isolde asked, ice spreading through her chest. "A binding ritual," Cashin explained, almost conversational now. "Old magic. Powerful magic. When Valerius arrives tomorrow night, we'll use your blood and Elena's connection to force him to his knees. Quite literally. He'll be compelled to obey every command, including the one where he hands over his crown and swears fealty to his new king." He ran his fingers over the altar's edge.
Me.
"That kind of magic requires consent from the bloodline," Isolde said, recalling fragments of the lore Valerius had once taught her. "Elena would have to participate willingly." "Not if we have something she wants more than freedom," Dorian said softly. They all looked at Isolde. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. They would torture her, use her screams to break Elena's will, force the child to participate in the ritual to end her mother's suffering. "You're monsters," Isolde whispered. "No," Cashin corrected, eyes gleaming in the darkness. "We're survivors. And survival requires sacrifice. Usually someone else's." As they began preparing the ritual, drawing symbols in chalk and blood, lighting black candles that smelled of burned flesh, Isolde closed her eyes and thought of Elena. 7 years old, silver eyes full of wonder, laughter that could light up the darkest room. "Be brave, little one," Isolde thought desperately. "Stay in the fortress. Stay with your father. Don't let them use me to break you." But even as she prayed, Isolde knew her daughter. Knew Elena would never abandon her. And that love, the same love that made Isolde sacrifice everything, might be exactly what the rogues needed to destroy them all. Midnight arrived like a funeral bell. Valerius stood at the entrance of the Blood Cathedral alone, as demanded. The structure loomed against the night sky, a corpse of holy architecture, its spires broken like fingers clawing at an uncaring moon. Gargoyles leered from crumbling parapets. Ivy strangled stone columns. The air reeked of old death and older magic. He'd left his night guard 2 miles back, hidden in the forest. Left his crown in the fortress. Left everything except the cold rage that had sustained him for 3 centuries. The cathedral doors hung open, a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. Valerius walked inside. The interior was a monument to decay. Pews rotted where congregations once prayed. Shattered stained glass created broken rainbows across blood-stained floors. And in the center, suspended by iron chains beneath a collapsed dome, hung Isolde. She was pale, blood-streaked, her dress torn. But her eyes, those brown eyes that had haunted his dreams for 7 years, burned with defiance. Isolde. Her name escaped him like a prayer. "Valerius, no," she whispered. "You shouldn't have come." Touching. Cassian Vex emerged from behind the ruined altar, white hair ghostly, in the dim light. Rurik and Dorian flanked him, along with 30 shadowed figures armed with blades and dark magic. The great vampire king, arriving alone and unarmed as instructed. Cassian's smile was sharp as broken glass. How remarkably obedient fear makes even immortals. "Release her," Valerius said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Take me instead." "Oh, we'll take you," Dorian said, that perpetual smile twisting. "But first, a demonstration of how thoroughly we've won." He gestured, and enchanted mirrors materialized in the air, silver surfaces reflecting impossible distances. Elena's face appeared, sleeping peacefully in the fortress tower. Moonlight painted her features silver. The other children slept nearby, unaware of the danger converging on them. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Cassian observed. "Your secret daughter. 7 years hidden, and we found her in 2 weeks. Do you want to know how?" Valerius's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Your most trusted advisor," Cassian continued. "Theron. The one who helped Isolde escape. Loyal for centuries, until we offered him what you never could. A seat on the new council. Power in the coming regime. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Theron's been feeding us information for months," Dorian added. "Elena's location. The ward configurations. Every detail we needed." He traced a finger along the mirror's edge. "And now he's waiting at the fortress, ready to deliver her to us the moment you abdicate." "No," Isolde gasped. "Valerius, don't." "Quiet." Rurik's hand shot out, and an invisible force tightened around Isolde's throat. She choked, chains rattling as she struggled. "Stop." Valerius moved forward, but 30 blades materialized, pointing at his chest. "The terms are simple," Cassian said. "Kneel. Renounce your crown. Name me your successor. And order Theron to deliver Elena into our custody as surety for your cooperation." His eyes gleamed. "Do this, and Isolde lives. Refuse, and we kill her now. Then we go to the fortress, and take the child anyway." Valerius looked at Isolde, suspended and suffering. Her eyes met his across the ruined cathedral. And despite the agony, despite the chains, she shook her head.
"Don't," she mouthed.
"Protect her." In that moment, Valerius understood the impossible choice before him. Save the woman he loved, or protect the daughter he'd only just discovered. Preserve his throne and kingdom, or surrender everything to save his family. 3 centuries of power. 7 years of grief. One decision that would define eternity. "You have 10 seconds, Cassian said, pulling a dagger from his belt. "Then I start cutting pieces off your lover until you comply." 10. Valerius's hands clenched. 9. Isolde silently begged him with her eyes. "Save Elena."
8.
The mirrors showed Elena stirring in her sleep, as if sensing danger. 7. Valerius took 1 step forward, toward the altar where a crown would be laid down forever. 6. Cashin's smile widened, victory within reach. 5. And then, alarms. Distant but growing louder, bells ringing across the miles, echoing from the direction of the Nightborn fortress. Not the warning bells for attack. The emergency signal. Someone had breached the inner sanctum. In the enchanted mirrors, Elena's eyes snapped open. She sat up, clutching something that glowed with golden light, the sigil ring Isolde had given her. What? Dorian started. The mirrors flickered. Elena's small voice cut through them, amplified by ancient magic. I know what you're doing, and I won't let you hurt them. Valerius's eyes widened.
No.
Elena had activated the Bloodbond spell, the spell that would expose lies and reveal truth to every vampire in the kingdom. The spell that would put her directly in the traitor's crosshairs. Can we just take a moment to appreciate Elena's incredible bravery right here? This 7-year-old child just activated an ancient Bloodbond spell that exposed every traitor in the kingdom, and I am absolutely here for it. If you're feeling as emotional as I am about this powerful moment, slam that like button to show your appreciation for Elena's courage. This is the kind of character development that makes stories unforgettable, and I promise you, the next chapters are going to deliver even more epic moments. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. What would you do if you were in Elena's position? Would you have the courage to use the spell knowing it might put you in even greater danger? Or would you trust the adults to handle it? Your answers always fascinate me, so drop your thoughts below. And listen, if you're binge watching this story and loving every second, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because tomorrow's story is going to be absolutely spectacular. I'm talking tears, triumph, and plot twists you won't see coming. Don't miss out. Alright, let's see what happens at the Blood Cathedral when that golden light reaches Valerius and the rogues. Elena woke to silence, the kind that presses against your ears like water. The fortress felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Even the ever-present whisper of night guards moving through corridors had ceased, replaced by a tension so thick she could taste it on her tongue like copper. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the other children sleeping around her. Moonlight streamed through the tower window, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. But it wasn't the moon that had woken her. It was the feeling, the same instinct that had made her step into the road in front of a vampire king's carriage. The same certainty that had guided her through fog-thick forests without stumbling. The knowledge, bone-deep and absolute, that her mother was in danger. Elena's hand moved to the chain around her neck, finding the small object hidden beneath her borrowed dress. The sigil ring. Her mother had given it to her on her 7th birthday, threading it onto a silver chain with trembling hands. Keep this close, Isolde had whispered. If the worst happens, if I can't protect you anymore, this ring will show the truth to those who need to see it. Elena had never understood what that meant. Until now. She slipped from the cushions, bare feet silent on plush carpet. The other children slept on, Thomas with his arm flung over little Mira, protective even in dreams. They were safe here. The fortress was sealed, guarded, and guarded. But something whispered that safety was an illusion. Elena moved to the window, pressing her small hands against cold glass. Beyond the fortress walls, darkness stretched endlessly. Somewhere in that darkness, her mother hung in chains. Somewhere out there, her father faced impossible choices. And somewhere very close, someone is lying. The thought arrived unbidden, but Elena knew it was true. She'd felt it during the council meeting, the way certain elders watched her father with calculation instead of loyalty. The way one night guard's hand had trembled when Valerius mentioned the traitor. The way Theron, the ancient advisor her mother had trusted, had looked at Elena with something that wasn't quite kindness. Elena pulled the ring from beneath her dress, studying it in moonlight. It was simple, silver band etched with symbols she couldn't read. But as she held it, the metal grew warm against her palm. The Bloodbond spell, her mother had explained once, during a lesson about the old magic. Ancient vampires used it to expose lies and reveal truth. It requires 3 things: blood of the innocent, will of the desperate, and courage of the terrified. Elena had all three. She thought of her mother's lessons, not about magic or monsters, but about something deeper. Courage isn't not being afraid, my darling. Courage is being absolutely terrified and doing what's right anyway. Elena was terrified. Her hand shook as she pricked her finger on the ring's edge, sharper than it looked. Blood welled, dark and bright. She pressed the bloodied finger to the center of the sigil, where the symbols converged into something that looked like a star, or a heart breaking open. The ring flared gold. Light burst from the metal, expanding outward in waves that rippled through the tower room. The sleeping children didn't wake, protected by innocent dreams. But beyond the window, Elena saw the light spreading, cascading over fortress walls, racing across courtyards, seeping through stone and shadow. And with the light came knowledge. Images flooded Elena's mind, memories that weren't hers, truths the ring had gathered like a spider gathering dew. Theron in his chambers, speaking to a raven with crimson eyes. Yes, the child is here. No, the king suspects nothing. Deliver the message to Cashin. Everything proceeds as planned. A night guard removing ward stones, replacing them with corrupted versions that would allow enemies through. His face twisted with greed and resentment. 3 centuries serving a king who barely remembers my name. But Cashin Vex remembers. Cashin rewards. Elder Constantine accepting a vial of forbidden blood magic from Dorian Skell. When the time comes, paralyze the night guard. Let the rogues take the fortress unopposed. The betrayals ran deeper than anyone had guessed. Not one traitor, 7. All promised power in the new regime. All willing to sell out their king for a taste of what Cashin Vex offered. Elena gasped, the visions overwhelming her. But the spell wasn't finished. The golden light reached beyond the fortress now, spreading across the kingdom like dawn breaking over darkness. Every vampire in the realm, elder and guard, noble and servant, felt the truth slam into them with the force of revelation. They saw Cashin Vex's true plans, not to rule justly, but to enslave the human territories. They saw Rurik Blackveil's blood magic experiments, torture disguised as research. They saw Dorian Skell's network of spies, ready to purge anyone who opposed the new order. The rogues had painted themselves as liberators. The blood bond spell revealed them as tyrants. In villages across the kingdom, vampires who'd been swayed by Cashin's promises turned against them. Former allies became enemies. Support crumbled like sandcastles before a tide. And at the Blood Cathedral, 200 miles away, the golden light burst through shattered stained glass. Cashin Vex froze mid-threat, his dagger hovering above Isolde's bleeding arm. The light washed over him, over Rurik and Dorian, over their 30 hired blades. Everyone in the cathedral, everyone in the kingdom, saw their lies exposed. Saw the truth written in light that couldn't be denied or twisted. Valerius straightened from his half-kneel, understanding flooding through him. Elena, his daughter, had activated the blood bond spell, had chosen courage over safety, had exposed the rot festering in his kingdom with 7-year-old hands and an innocent heart. Pride and terror warred in his chest. Cashin stumbled backward, his face contorted with rage.
No. No.
The spell was legend. It shouldn't exist. It exists, Valerius said quietly, power returning to his voice. And now your own allies know exactly what you are. In the enchanted mirrors still hovering in the air, Elena collapsed in the tower room, the sigil ring cooling against her chest. She'd given everything to the spell. All her strength, all her desperate will. But she'd succeeded. The truth was revealed. And across the kingdom, the rogue's support evaporated like mist before sunlight. Cashin Vex realized, in that terrible moment, that he'd lost before the final battle even began. All because he'd underestimated the courage of one small girl who loved her parents more than she feared the dark. The golden light of the blood bond spell faded, leaving the Blood Cathedral in stark moonlight. But something had fundamentally shifted in the atmosphere, power redistributing itself like water finding new channels. Valerius Nightborn stood at full height now, no longer the desperate father willing to sacrifice everything. The vampire king had returned, and with him came 3 centuries of carefully controlled wrath finally unleashed. "You made a miscalculation," Valerius said, his voice carrying through the ruined cathedral with terrible calm. "You believed love made me weak. But you forgot what I am when protecting what I love." Cassion's face twisted with fury. "The spell changes nothing. We still have 30 blades. Look at them." The hired mercenaries were backing away, weapons lowering. The blood bond spell had shown them everything. The torture Cassion planned for captured enemies, the purges Rurik would conduct, the enslavement Dorian had designed. Men who'd been promised glory saw only graves. One by one, they fled into the night. Cassion, Rurik, and Dorian stood alone. "You chose exile over execution once," Cassion snarled, raising his blade. "That was your mistake, not ours." "No," Valerius said softly. "My mistake was believing mercy and weakness were the same thing. Let me correct that misunderstanding." He moved, not with the speed of a vampire simply attacking, with the controlled precision of an apex predator who'd hunted for 300 years. Cassion's blade never touched him. Valerius caught the weapon mid-strike, shattering it with bare hands, then drove his palm into Cassion's chest. "But not to kill."
Not yet.
"Moonfire," Valerius whispered, and silver light erupted from his hand. Ancient magic, the kind only vampire kings could wield, poured into Cassion's body. It was designed for one purpose, to burn away darkness from the inside. Cassion screamed as the moonfire found every cruelty, every betrayal, every innocent life he destroyed in his pursuit of power. The magic didn't just punish. It was erased. When the light faded, Cassion collapsed, still alive, still breathing, but changed. His vampire strength was gone, his immortality stripped away. He'd been reduced to what he was before his transformation centuries ago, a mortal man who would age and die like any other. "You wanted my throne?" Valerius said, looking down at the broken figure. "You'll spend your remaining years remembering you once held power and threw it away for ambition. That's a longer death than any blade could give you." Rurik Blackveil roared, forbidden blood magic igniting across his massive frame. The arcane marks on his flesh blazed crimson as he charged, intending to overwhelm through sheer brutal force. Valerius raised one hand. The shadows answered. They erupted from every corner of the cathedral, darkness given form and purpose. The shadows wrapped around Rurik like chains, binding him in layers of absolute blackness. He struggled, blood magic flaring, but the shadows only tightened. "You fed on pain for power," Valerius said. "Now you'll understand what true darkness feels like." The binding spell completed. Rurik stood frozen, trapped in eternal shadow, conscious, aware, but unable to move or speak. A living statue that would remain in the cathedral's ruins as a warning to any who thought to challenge the Night Court again. Only Dorian remained. The youngest rogue backed toward a shattered window, that perpetual smile finally cracking. "Valerius, wait. We can negotiate." "You used my daughter as a weapon," Valerius said, each word sharp as broken glass. "There is no negotiation." Dorian bolted, vampire speed carrying him toward escape. He made it 3 steps before night guards materialized from the surrounding forest, blocking every exit. They'd been waiting, hidden but ready, for Valerius's signal. "Take him to the fortress dungeons," Valerius commanded. "He'll stand trial before the full court for treason, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Let it be known that I will not grant mercy twice." As the guards dragged a screaming Dorian away, Valerius finally turned to Isolde. She hung in her chains, watching him with those brown eyes he'd dreamed of for 7 years. Blood matted her hair. Bruises darkened her pale skin. But she was alive. Valerius crossed to her in 3 strides, tearing the blessed chains apart with bare hands despite the holy water burning his flesh. Isolde collapsed forward, and he caught her, cold immortal arms cradling warm human fragility. Isolde, he whispered, and centuries of loneliness cracked in his voice. You came, she breathed against his chest. You called. I will always come. He lifted her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Her hand rose to touch his face, the same gesture she'd made 7 years ago, tracing the angles of his immortal features as if relearning something precious. Elena is safe.
Strong.
Braver than either of us imagined. Valerius's voice caught. She activated the blood bond spell, exposed every traitor, turned the kingdom against the rogues without a single blade drawn. Tears streamed down Isolde's face. That's our daughter. Our daughter. The words settled into Valerius's chest where his heart had stopped beating 300 years ago. He carried Isolde from the Blood Cathedral, night guards falling into formation around them. The fortress was 2 hours away by carriage, but Valerius moved faster. Vampire speed tempered to protect his precious cargo. Behind them, the cathedral stood in ruins, moonfire and shadow magic still flickering across its stones. A monument to the price of betrayal. Ahead, dawn approached, a line of gold and rose painting the eastern horizon. Valerius had lived 3 centuries in darkness, ruling the night with iron and fear. But as he carried the woman he loved toward the daughter he'd only just discovered, something impossible happened. The vampire king didn't flee from the coming light. He turned toward it, and for the first time in 300 years, Valerius Nightborn felt something more powerful than any magic or immortality could provide. Hope. Dawn broke over the Nightborn fortress, with colors Valerius had forgotten existed, gold and amber bleeding into rose and violet. He stood at Isolde's bedside, watching healers work with a mixture of ancient vampire medicine and human herb craft, a collaboration that would have been impossible mere days ago. Isolde's breathing had steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. The worst wounds had been closed with spell work. The rest would heal with time and care. She's strong, said Healer Marin, a vampire who'd served the court for 2 centuries. The human body is more resilient than we often credit. She always has been, Valerius murmured. A small sound drew his attention to the doorway. Elena stood there, still wearing the borrowed midnight blue dress, her silver eyes wide and uncertain. She'd exhausted herself with the blood bond spell, sleeping through the night while Valerius rescued her mother. Now she stared at Isolde's sleeping form, tears streaming down her face. Mama, she whispered. She's alive, Valerius said gently, extending his hand. Come. Elena crossed the room slowly, climbing onto the bed with careful movements. She curled against Isolde's side, small fingers clutching her mother's hand. Isolde's eyes fluttered open. Elena. Her voice was hoarse, but filled with wonder. My brave girl. You're safe now, Elena said through tears. Father saved you. The spell worked. Everything worked. Isolde's gaze found Valerius standing beside the bed. 7 years of separation collapsed in that single look, all the longing, the sacrifice, the love that had never diminished despite the distance. Valerius, she breathed. He sat on the bed's edge, creating a triangle of connection. Father, mother, daughter. A family forged from impossible circumstances and held together by choices that defied every logical rule. I should have searched harder, Valerius said quietly. Should have found you. You would have led your enemies straight to her. Isolde interrupted, her free hand finding his. I knew that. You would have torn apart kingdoms, and they would have followed your path like breadcrumbs. My disappearance kept Elena hidden. But you suffered alone. I was never alone. Isolde squeezed Elena's hand. I had her. Every moment was worth it. Elena looked between her parents, the vampire king who'd ruled for 3 centuries, and the human woman who'd loved him enough to vanish. What happens now? Valerius exchanged a glance with Isolde. Then he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his ancient features into something almost human. Now, he said, we rewrite every rule that made this sacrifice necessary. The throne room had never seen such a gathering. Vampire elders stood beside human ambassadors. Night guards flanked border captains. Former enemies shared space, drawn together by the truth the blood bond spell had revealed, that cooperation wasn't weakness, but survival. Valerius stood before his throne, Elena at his side wearing a dress of midnight silk with silver embroidery. A crown of moonflowers, Isolde's favorite, rested on her dark hair. Not a symbol of power, but of protection. For 3 centuries, Valerius announced, his voice carrying through the vast chamber, I ruled through fear, through distance. I believed that caring for nothing made me invincible. His hand settled on Elena's shoulder. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Fear creates order, but it also creates resentment. Distance prevents betrayal, but it also prevents loyalty. I maintained peace by making myself untouchable. He looked down at Elena. But what kind of kingdom asks its ruler to sacrifice everything human, including love, for stability? Elder Moira stepped forward, her ancient face thoughtful. You propose changing our laws? I propose evolving them, Valerius corrected. The old treaties included provisions for hybrid bloodlines. We simply never enacted them. Today, I invoke Article 17 in full. Human vampire families are recognized, protected, celebrated as bridges between our worlds rather than weaknesses to exploit. Captain Thorne, the human border guard commander, nodded. The eastern provinces support this decree. We've seen what isolation breeds: suspicion, fear, violence. Connection is harder, but stronger. Lady Miriam smiled. The ambassadors agree. Let this be remembered as the night court chose unity over tradition. Valerius lifted Elena gently, settling her on the throne's edge, not claiming power, but claiming space, claiming the right to exist as his daughter, without shame or secrecy. Elena Nightborn, he declared, is recognized as princess of the Night Court, protected under vampire law and human treaty. Any who threaten her commit an act of war against both kingdoms. The throne room erupted, not in protest, but in cautious approval. Change was frightening, but the blood bond spell had shown them something crucial. The rogue's promises of power had been built on lies, while Valerius's promises of protection were built on love. Love was the stronger foundation. 1 week later, a black carriage rolled through the kingdom, but everything about it felt different. Elena sat beside Valerius, watching villages pass through the window. But now, people didn't flee at the carriage's approach. They waved. Children pointed with excitement rather than terror. One little girl even threw flowers that landed on the carriage roof. Isolde sat across from them, still healing but present. Her hand rested in Valerius's, a connection 7 years couldn't break. The court is adapting, she observed. Faster than I expected. Fear of change is strong, Valerius admitted. But fear of returning to civil war is stronger. The blood bond spell showed them what Cashin's regime would have created. By comparison, a hybrid princess seems remarkably reasonable. Elena pressed her face against the window, watching the world transform around them. Will there be more children like me? Half vampire, half human. Perhaps, Valerius said. If others find what your mother and I found, something worth risking everything for. The carriage continued through twilight, no longer a symbol of dread, but of possibility. Inside the fortress that night, Elena fell asleep between her parents, Isolde's warmth on one side, Valerius's cool presence on the other. Balanced, protected, loved. And in the throne room below, a kingdom rebuilt itself around a simple truth. The greatest power isn't the ability to inspire fear. It's the courage to choose love, even when love makes you vulnerable. Especially then. And that, my incredible story, family, is how a vampire king who ruled through fear for 300 years learned that love is the greatest power of all. I hope Elena, Valerius, and Isolde's journey touched your heart the way it touched mine. If you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster from beginning to end, please show your support by giving this video a massive thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people discover these stories. And I have to ask, what was your favorite moment? Was it when Elena bravely stopped the carriage? When Valerius unleashed his wrath at the Blood Cathedral? Or that beautiful ending scene with the family finally united? Tell me in the comments below because I absolutely love reading your reactions and connecting with you all. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. I post incredible stories like this one every single day. Tales of love, redemption, fantasy, and adventure that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And speaking of which, tomorrow I've got something really special planned. Another epic tale that's going to take you on an unforgettable journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Before you go, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending your time with me today. Whether you're watching from New York, London, Mumbai, Tokyo, or anywhere else in this beautiful world, you're part of this amazing community, and I appreciate every single one of you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our story family reaches across the globe. Until tomorrow, keep believing in the power of love, keep embracing your courage like Elena, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength comes from protecting what we love most. See you in the next story, friends. Take care.